Good afternoon, Saitlanders. How are you? We hope that you're very, very, very well. I'd like to chat with you briefly, I hope, because there's some other things I want and need to do, about the latest in the Parler scandal, the independent inquiry, the potential impeachment of the president, that whole farrago, that whole spaghetti mess, that saga. We didn't make a video on this yesterday because there was some clarity lacking, and of course on Sunday that clarity was even more lacking. You'll remember that as of last Friday there was a whole lot of uncertainty about what was going to happen next, and the president was meant to have, well, supposedly anyway, addressed the nation in one of his family meetings on SABC, and he was meant to have resigned by then, but those events didn't transpire. So I'm going to take you back a couple of steps and remind you of the background to this, and then present you with the real theme of this video. So, what do we know? We know that yesterday, Monday the 5th of December, the ANC's NEC met in a special session to debate the Section 89 report on the investigations into the Parler scandal of February 2020. As revealed later, the scandal happened in February 2020. The main events, the discovery of the money by the domestic worker, the arrangement of the theft, the kidnapping of the thieves, their interrogations, etc., etc. And then it was only much later revealed by the head of the State Security Agency, previously known as the National Intelligence Agency, and I believe before that it was known as the National Intelligence Service, unless I'm mistaken, this guy Arthur Fraser. So he obviously did it to expose the president, and we're going to come to that in a minute. I mean, what other motive could there be? Expose the president for a criminal and to undermine him, and I suppose get him impeached and kicked out. Right. Just to help you a little bit on this NEC thing, I think this might be the opportune moment. So, the African National Congress has whatever number of members. It traditionally had, and I know this for a fact, because I was involved in work that required me to know precisely how many people would attend a certain function. It traditionally had about 5,000 branches across the country in various provinces. That number appears to have fallen. I was doing some research for this, and I saw quite an authoritative article describing the number as 4,700. Now it's down to 3,979 branches across South Africa. 3,979, practically 4,000 branches across South Africa. And it's been well documented, well covered by the Mail and Guardian. In fact, as an aside, by the 13th of October, only 2,000 something of the branches had conducted the meetings, the elections, and so on for the now coming come on, Simon, the conference, the elective conference. That's the word I'm looking for, which will take place from the 16th to the 20th of December. And the Mail and Guardian was reporting that this is a very big problem. But worse than that, it reported that of those 2,000 odd meetings that should have taken place, of the 3,979 that should have taken place, of which only 2,000 and something had taken place by the 13th of October, of those 1,555 were irregular and illegitimate and declared null and void. And this is a relevant anecdote because it goes to help the people who might watch this video to understand the degree of anarchy and chaos in the African National Congress. This is not just some right-wing, racist, horrible, nasty allegation. The reality is that the African National Congress is chaotic. I can tell you stories that you will not believe. You will watch the video, and at the end you will say to yourself or to somebody sitting next to you, that man is a liar. It is beyond your comprehension how shambolic is the African National Congress and are the people of the African National Congress, jointly and severally, as they say under law, as a unit and as individuals. Okay, so you have your 3,979 branches. They elect representatives. They go to the 5-yearly elective conference, and there they vote on everything. So, in that sense, those representatives, those 3,979 branches representatives, are the voices of the grassroots of the African National Congress. And they have a lot of influence in that role. So they elect the National Executive Committee. Lots of elections, but that's... The National Executive Committee is roughly 110 people. In other words, it is, I believe it's 2 people from every province are automatically the head of the province, the president, prime minister, whatever, and the secretary are automatically represented. That's 18. And then it's 6 of these, and then it's 40 of those, and the ANC Women's League gets 2 representatives, and the ANC Youth League, and so on, and it comes to roughly 110 people, although they can add another 5, and some of the people are ex officio and so on. That's roughly. Okay. Then they elect a National Working Committee. The National Working Committee is composed of the National Executive Committee, and I think that they can elect outsiders ex officio or something like that. You don't have to be part of the NEC, but roughly speaking, they take the top 6 of the NEC, which is the President, Deputy President, Treasurer, Secretary General, and I can't remember the other 2. They take those 6. They say, by virtue of already being elected in those positions, you will be the first 6 people of the National Working Committee. And then they elect another 20 people and 3 ex officio people. So depending on how you want to look at it, the National Working Committee is composed of 26 to 29 people. So you've got the top 6, but don't get it wrong, they're not an entity by themselves, by no stretch of the imagination. They are the top 6 of the NEC. They are elected in that NEC structure. Or they are constituted within the NEC structure. So when they have their presidential ding-dong battles, who's going to win, Thabo Mbeki versus Jacob Zuma, Cyril Ramaphosa versus Paul Mashatile, when those guys win, I'm now the president of the ANC, I don't form a separate committee, my top 6 committee, no. I and the other top 5 are the top 6 of the NEC. which is elected, as we've already described, by the branches of the African National Congress. Right. The NEC met, so these 110 people, not the 29 odd of the National Working Committee, because this is important. The NEC is actually superior to the National Working Committee. It is its boss, and indeed, they are the boss of the top six as well. The top six and the National Working Committee are effectively just deployees of the National Executive Committee, as the National Executive Committee is theoretically merely 110 people deployed by the branches. So this is the theoretical democracy of the thing. Okay, now, where does this leave us? The NEC was meant to meet on Friday, then it was going to be Saturday, then I didn't even pass, so I stopped paying attention. I made a conscious decision that I would pay attention again when I saw some kind of headline or suggestion that these fools had gotten their act together. They met yesterday. The NEC, 110 people, who, by the way, whose positions, by the way, will be up for re-election on the 16th, between the 16th to the 20th of this month, today being the 6th, so in 10 days' time, 9 days' time. Okay, so they met to discuss the Cyril Ramaphosa thing after failing to do it for 2 or 3 days, true to form. Nothing new there. Cyril Ramaphosa rocked up because many of the people had complained that he hadn't bothered to attend the first abortive meeting to handle this matter on Friday. All right, you want me there, I'll come. He went. He gave a speech. He basically said, look, why don't you guys get on with it? You talk without fear or favor. I won't sit here and glare at people and bully them or make them feel uncomfortable, tacitly or passively, if you like, influence proceedings. I'll leave. You carry on. It's okay. So, the long and the short of it is that they reviewed the Section 89 Independent Committee report, or the Section 89 Independent Committee's investigations report on the Phala saga, which was appointed by Parliament. Please remember this. It's not like man from outer space. We're coming to a point, and you'll see why I mentioned this now. It is the Parliament in which the ANC has an overall majority, an absolute majority. The ANC governs by virtue of more than 50% of the vote, which is not always the case. In the USA, it's the case. Many of you may have been fascinated by the US elections, and the Senate, 100 senators of 50 states, each have 2 senators representing them in the United States Senate. Or the Democrats have got 46 so far. The votes are counted 46. The Republicans have got 44. Who's going to get to 50 or 51 or 52 or 53 first? You followed the race, neck and neck, horses, because they only have 2 parties. In South Africa, or let's say in the United Kingdom or France or wherever else, it is possible to be the governing party without 50% of the vote. You may get 30%, or let's make a more realistic number, 35%. The next party gets 25%. The party after that gets 15%. The party after that gets 5%. How's my math? 35 and 25 is 60, and 15 is 75. Okay, we've only got 80. But the queen of the country, or the president, if it's a prime ministerial system, where the prime minister is the head of government, or the head of the independent electoral authority, then rings you up. Hi, this is Buckingham Palace. You got 35% of the vote. You didn't get half, but you got more than anybody else. pop in for a cup of tea and a cucumber sandwich, and let's talk about you forming the next government. Now, obviously, it's difficult to govern that way because you've got the majority of the parliament in opposition. And presumably, they're jealous and envious and covetous. But in South Africa, the African National Congress has more than 50% of the vote. So when the parliament says, we wish for an independent inquiry into the Pala saga and scandal, that's not entirely the ANC, but it includes the ANC. It's not as if they had nothing to do with it. Shame we were left out, nobody told us, everybody's always so unfair. Which, as you know, is a typical disposition. If you're from Durban, you will be very, 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 very familiar. Durban and surrounds, let's say Natal, with the, and to some extent Gauteng, with the stickers on the backs of taxis reading, I am always a suspect. Poor me, you know? Okay. These guys, the parliament, the ANC's parliament, voted and resolved to appoint a Section 89 in terms of the Constitution, which provides for interrogation, if you like, of corruption. Section 89 committee composed of independent people. Actually, not independent. A panel of former justices headed by former Chief Justice Sandile Ngcobo, who are all formerly deployees of the African National Congress, deployed cadres of the African National Congress. And if you know anything about the writings of the African National Congress, then you know that the African National Congress has been explicit about ensuring, I beg your pardon, that the people who control the most important levers of state and organs of state must be deployed cadres of the African National Congress. But supposedly, this is an independent panel. So these justices took a look at this matter at the behest of the parliament, dominated as it is by the African National Congress and not by a bunch of small little parties, each with 1%, 9%, 29%. No, they with their 50+% dominate the parliament. So they've been doing this thing for a number of months. I couldn't tell you when they began their work. It cost 3.5 million rand. And it found, they presented their report, this report, to the Speaker of the Parliament last Wednesday, I believe the 30th of November. And it was then disseminated to the members of Parliament or to the various political parties or to the relevant portfolio committees. And then the storm broke a day or two later. All hell broke loose, you could say. Once it became public by Wednesday night, Thursday, there were numerous objections. There were calls for the president to resign, and there were calls for the president to be impeached. And impeachment is very simple. All it means is that when you hold an office of a certain level, let's say, this is a poor example, but you're the Pope of Rome. You are held to a different standard. It's the same with judges. The word impeachment is very relevant to judges. Judges must be unimpeachable, which is not to say that they must obey the laws like you and I do. It's to say that they must be held to a higher standard
there can't be the whiff of scandal about them. Nowadays, that doesn't count for much. You only have to look at American politics to know that it doesn't count for much. And certainly in South African politics, it doesn't count for much. You've got to break the law as you and I do, or break a rule as you and I would, to be impeached. Whereas 100 years ago, you could be impeached just for the whiff of scandal about you. For instance, if you were a judge who had a consensual affair, extramarital affair, consensual, perhaps you're single, whatever, it doesn't, I don't want to be grotty about it, but you could not break a law and yet be impeached. Your fellow judges might say, can you believe the disgrace? This man is having connubial activities out of wedlock. Right. So, what happened next? We had all of these meetings. And, I should first say this. What is the wording that was used? It was that prima facie means at first glance, at first sight, at first look. So that committee did not say, we are firmly convinced that Cyril Ramaphosa has done manifest wrong. What it said, rather, is, we conclude. So it says, okay, but let me read it from the beginning. It said, in light of the information before it, we conclude that this information, the information that has been presented to us, the information before us, it's important that they say that. They're not suggesting in terms of all of the information in all of the world. We know for sure that we have investigated this thing. Captain so-and-so and Sergeant so-and-so, they've been looking glass, magnifying glass, fingerprint kits, the whole lot. We believe we've got the full picture. No. They say in terms of the information that we've got, it discloses prima facie that the president may have, by the way, you will hear people pronounce that differently, which is fine. But I promise you, the correct pronunciation is prima facie. That the president may have committed a serious violation of sections 96.2a of the Constitution. We're not even going to go into that. And a serious violation of section 34 of the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act. A serious misconduct. So the serious violation is a serious misconduct. In that the president violated section 96.2b of the Constitution by acting in a way that is inconsistent with his office. And you see that hints at the definition of impeachment that I gave you earlier. And a serious misconduct in that the president violated section 96.2b by exposing himself to a situation involving a conflict between his official responsibilities and his private business. Okay, we're coming to the point here. So you're familiar with the dramas that transpired after that, and we've touched on them. Right. Fast forward to Monday the 5th, yesterday, and to the reading that I've been doing this whole morning long to ensure that I've got a fair enough understanding to convey it to you in layman's terms. The NEC, the National Executive Committee, met, as we said. And Cyril rocked up. He said, listen, it's probably better that I'm not here. He ducked. They carried on. And in the end, they voted. This is going to sound like mealy-mouthed English. They voted to resolve to vote against the adoption of the report by the Parliament. So the report has been handed to the Speaker of the Parliament. Now the Parliament
has to vote to adopt the report. Hey, do we accept this thing? We paid these oaks $3.5 million. Let's have a look here. Did they do their work? Oh dear me, no, this is atrocious. We won't adopt this into the parliamentary record. We won't adopt this into, we won't accept it. And that brings us to the point. So these oaks appoint this committee composed of people who have some allegiance to the ANC, and upon discovering the contents of their report, or the gist of the report, or the conclusions of the report, they promptly proceed to say, no ways. We as the NEC are going to tell the members of parliament, remember the NEC is not the members of the ANC MPs. That's an entirely different thing. Completely different. That's another voting process at the ANC. They make a long list. And that list may have 200 names on it. I'm just talking numbers loosely here. And what it amounts to is, the way the South African system works is that the party that gets, there are some exceptions to this, but by and large, the party that gets 50% of the vote is entitled to send 50% of the seats of parliament, people to occupy 50% of the seats of parliament. So if you've got 400 seats in parliament, they send 200. If they get 51% of the votes, they send 202. And so it goes on. And those people are not necessarily members of the NEC or of the branches or of the street committees, if you know what that means, or the NWC, or the top six is a bit different. President is implied automatically. President of the ANC, president of the country, assuming the ANC wins the elections. So we're going to tell our guys in parliament, who are not necessarily the same as us, they're not necessarily us. Last year we won 50 whatever percent of the vote, we sent that number of people. We're going to tell those guys that they had better vote against adopting this report. And, ladies and gentlemen, that is the point of this video, or it implies the point of this video.
Very secretive, very non-disclosing kind of way.
You see, yeah, what they have done, implicitly, not explicitly, but implicitly, is give a license to all of the rest of the country to break law or laws as and when and how they see fit. We know that the African National Congress has been breaking the law since Pa fell off the bus. But this is the most egregious example of hubris in that regard that I can think of. Egregious is like most outstanding or most offensive example. Hubris is pride against God. And of course we're not really talking about God here, but in the sense that the sovereign state of South Africa as a social democratic, as an expression of social democracy, because the ANC is a socialist party, and the SACP remains the nerve center of the tripartite alliance. The brains of the ANC lie in the SACP. You may take my word for it. It's hubris in as much as, if you don't believe in God and the state is everything, it is the uppermost of your cosmologia, your material existence, and you snub your nose, or you do this as the Latin people do, to the state and its laws, It's tantamount to hubris. It is the highest form of pride manifest as arrogance. And it pertains ultimately not to the report. It pertains ultimately to what was known to have happened. Now you might say to me, yeah, but Simon, correlation does not equal causation. And I would say to you, yes, I can understand that. But in this case, you're dissembling with semantics. Because the average person knows, as we would say in English, full thing well, that although the ANC can look at that report and say, no, well, we must take it under review and we're not happy about this and that doesn't work so very well for us, and how did they manage to extrapolate this conclusion from those syllogisms? Yeah. Maar I look at that thing and I see, using common sense, not intellectual acrobatics, intellectual contortions, I see this. The president had $4 million stashed in a couch. Some people will say, well, he had $4 million. I would say, if you think that he doesn't, I'm sorry, I know I'm a terrible human being, that he doesn't also have bank accounts, and that he might, I don't know, have a safe on the premises, then I say, let's not talk with one another, you and me. Let's not. It is intellectuals like you that are the bête noire, the black monsters of the 20th century Christendom. Sophistical dissembling is what you are guilty of. Highly intelligent dishonesty. He had $4 million just in his couch. Only in his couch. If you think that's the first place he would have chosen to hide it, there's something wrong with your mind, man. So what was found was 4 million, and it's the reasonable man. In Roman Dutch law, there is a thing known as the reasonable man test. When a circumstance or an event or a crime is beyond the definitions of the law, when the judge goes home and he reads Tertius 3 days in a row, he can't find, he reads case law, he goes all the way back to Roman, he can't, he might come and say the reasonable man. So he comes back to give the sentence, past sentence, and he says to the plaintiff, the defendant, the advocate, the public prosecutor, look, according to the reasonable man test, I adjudicate that so-and-so is in the wrong. Stuff the law. I'm exaggerating now. But at the end of all of the days, if a legal matter cannot be resolved by the law, there is this legal precept of, well, just use common sense, you idiot. And it is known as the reasonable man test. When the law can't handle them, just use common sense, you fool. So, the reasonable man knows that there was probably a hang of a lot more than 4 million rand, because stashing your only $4 million, not rand, dollars, illicit money, we're going to come to that, in your couch, no, No. Yeah, Mensa, let me tell you. I know people who have, like these safety deposit boxes, and I'm not talking about like Saitlanders people, wealthy Saitlanders people who doubtless do have such things. I'm talking about proper. I've been, with my eyes I've seen. You think that doesn't have? Come on, you can do better than that. Come on, you can do it. You think he didn't maybe take half home with him? From Pala to, what's the place called? At the Union Buildings? Or to his own house? Or to his brother-in-law's house? You don't think? So for starters, we know we've got 4 million rand, and the reasonable man thinks to $4 million, and the reasonable man thinks to himself, I know that I can't convict this guy of having $40 million, but dear me, I'm not going to let the 4 million that has been found and that is not disputed be pretended away. And we know that he didn't report those $4 million to the South African Reserve Bank. Do you know that it's not even legal to have that? I forget what the amounts are. But if you, like from traveling, we've never really raised much money overseas, we Saitlanders. But you're conscious of what you have on you. It might be, I think I don't want to say because I don't want to tell a fib, but less than $10,000, far less, is the most I've ever returned with from overseas, from collections. And you're conscious of it. You're on the plane, you know that the government doesn't like you, there's probably some agent watching you, you've been told by somebody who really knows that the moment that you land, there's a bulletin that goes out stating that you're there, blah, 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 blah. So you don't want to be the guy who gets caught. So you check those little blue forms. How much currency, what must I declare? Oh, I've got deer horns. I went hunting in Montana. No, not literally. I'm bringing, okay, only 2 bottles of deodorant. You insure. Now, I can't remember. You're not even allowed to have. And what you have must be declared. This guy's possessing money that he's not allowed to have in his hands. You know that if you make, I think it's, I could be, any money obtained from overseas that is in foreign currency has to be given into the South African Reserve. I'm not talking about reporting over $10,000. How much have you got on you, sir? Anything to declare? Regardless, even if you're below the threshold, there is an instruction that you must take that to your local United Building Society or South African Permanent or Volkskas within whatever it is, 14 or 21 days, and exchange it. You're not even allowed to possess. On top of that, with big numbers like that, you have to declare. As I say, I can't remember what is the threshold. I want to say $10,000, but I could be mistaken. We know those two things. Bum. We know also he didn't pay tax on that money, nor did he report it, which is also a requirement, to SARS, not the South African Reserve Bank, SARS. Hey, I've got this money. An exceptional transaction. But don't you worry, I'll pay tax on it on the 30th or whenever. We know also that the crime was never reported to the South African Police Service. The theft and what have you. And we know also that the presidency resorted to vigilantism to get those people, kidnap them, bring them back and interrogate them. And this long video, now running to nearly 40 minutes, is really about that. I've taken a long time and been thorough in building an argument that is irrefutable and incontrovertible. Really just to make a very small point. There's a great big spearhead here, but actually it's only the tip that kills. The point is that the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress, by virtue of its decision yesterday to vote against the adoption of the report that they commissioned with their, or by their, independent committee, not to adopt it. But in so doing, they have given their imprimatur, their stamp, their blessing. The word imprimatur refers to a bishop's stamp, which implies a blessing. They have given their stamp and their blessing. Why should I? Obviously, I'm not going to, because I'm in the crosshairs, I'm in the eyes of the hawks. What do you call these guys? Crime intelligence, the state security agency. They would love to catch Saitlanders doing something dodgy. So, of course, I can't. And don't think that they aren't monitoring me morning, noon, and night. Especially traveling. Every phone call, every transaction, every... But in principle, why should I say, darling, wake up, we're almost at Jan Smuts, Johannesburg International, Tambo Airport. Sweetie, how much money have we brought back from our trip to the south, the south of France? Oh dear, we're $100 over. We better tell them, Mr. Man. And then don't you forget, sweetie, because I've got to go to work tomorrow. You better dash on down to Boland Bank and hand the money and exchange it. Because we're not allowed to have it. Why would I do that? If I could reasonably get away with what he's gotten away with, and what the National Executive Committee has blessed him having gotten away with. This is a very big problem, ladies and gentlemen. When the rot starts, it never stops. There is a saying in English that is edifying, morally improving. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when at first we practice to deceive. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when at first we practice to deceive. Once you get into the habit, I'm not saying I don't lie, I do lie all the time. But there's a little line. And once you cross that line, once the lies control you more than you control them, it's over. And that happens very early on in the game, when at first we practice to deceive. And that could be applied here. This is not about deceit, but it's about that thing of when at first you start to say, well, it's only 4 million, not 40 million. He didn't report it to the police, but gee, he tortured those people with the presidential security, VIP, what state president's guard, VIP protection services. It's just like the police. It's similar. You know that it's recorded that he paid each of those people a bribe, the crooks, to keep quiet, $150,000. He paid them bribes. larger than the law permits in South Africa in terms of possessing of foreign currency. We've said enough. This has been 45 minutes long on one single subject. But let me tell you, let me say this. Damn them. Damn them because they have damned themselves. Damn them. Crooks, crooks, crooks.